Hello, thank you for joining us. As you know, my name is Russell and you're watching for Chits and Giggles Tea and a Chit Chat Live. Today, I am enamoured to be joined by the very lovely Kareem, also better known as the Board Game Minimalist. Thank you so much for joining today, by the way.
Hello, and thank you very much for having me. It's a real pleasure. I think you've had much more illustrious people than me on this program, so I feel truly honored. So I appreciate the invite.
I honestly wouldn't invite anyone on the show if I didn't think that they had something interesting to say. So you can sort of like put yourself among those lovely people. But yes.
Okay. So no pressure then.
No pressure. Obviously, this being called Tea and a Chit Chat. Now, lately, I have noticed a lot of people have been trying to ruin my format and not drinking tea, but that's okay. It's obviously not as common as I think. So I'm going to ask a question slightly different today. What beverage are you drinking today?
So today I have a low alcohol beer. So just a nice refreshing drink to have at this time of day. I do like tea, but I tend to have it in the morning mostly. But I'm definitely a tea fan myself as well. So
okay, so you are a tea drinker, but just not this time. And I think it's totally fine to be drinking at this time of the evening anyway. So please enjoy that. I will be jealous. I've just got my sort of standard cup of hot tea here to keep me going.
Is that a regular kind of tea, or is it a herbal tea, or what's the
I did my regular sort of boring English breakfast tea today because I just needed a little caffeine kick, and I'm just used to the taste by now. And I think actually what's that famous thing they say that like something breeds habit, so like
repetition, I guess.
Yes,
right?
You know that means. Oh, hello, Daryl.
So.
Hi, Daryl. Daryl's joining the stream. Thank you for joining us today. And it's a good time to bring up the fact that obviously, if you have any questions of your own that you'd like to put to Kareem, I will be collecting those and asking him towards the end of the stream. So please write them in the chat. You can still even tweet them to me. I'll check that throughout the video, and we'll put them to him at the end of the stream. Okay, so we've kind of got the kind of easy questions out the way. Well, they're all easy. I'm here because I was told there's going to be scones, Daryl says. Well, unfortunately, until they invent like a teleportation device, which can what's the thing they have in Star Trek? Like the replicator?
Yes,
the replicator. Once that's invented, then I will be giving out scones for people.
That's fair enough. Yeah.
So an easy question, actually, Noah. There's no difficult questions in this show. But one question I want to ask you first of all is are you okay? Are you doing okay? Obviously, there's lots of stuff happening in the world right now, but are you doing all right?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I mean, thankfully we're all fine. Managing. I've got a young daughter who's about 10 months old now, so she's keeping us very busy and very entertained, which is great. And I think we're just spending a lot of time, me and my wife, just kind of taking care of her, and that's sort of keeping us busy. It's a little bit difficult with family, friends, not being able to sort of come over and be with us in person, as I'm sure everybody's experiencing. But pretty much fine, getting used to this sort of slightly strange new reality that we've all been living for the past few months. So, how about yourself? Well,
yeah, I mean, I'm fine. I kind of like touched upon this, I am not working right now. I've been technically a furloughed employee, so I do technically have an employer, but obviously just not doing anything. So, which is why I decided to start this stream, actually. So it's been a good opportunity to sort of interact with the community, get to know people a bit better, and kind of do something productive with my time. So yeah, I'm doing fine. Like I really can't complain. But yeah, I'm glad. I know that I remember when you announced about your daughter on Twitter, and it's 10 months since that time already. That seems like time has actually flown by.
Yeah, no, it certainly has. Yeah, it's sort of been a bit of a whirlwind, but no, it's definitely been a while, and it's kind of one of those things where I think that as I was sort of expressing on Twitter the other day, that my board gaming has definitely taken a hit. Just becoming a father has really hit the board gaming sort of habits anyway, and then I think obviously with the current lockdown, not being able to get to sort of regular gaming sessions, not being able to visit fine board gaming cafe establishments like you're very familiar with. Has been challenging. So I think I've been a little bit quieter and a little bit less active than I would have normally been, just because I haven't had the chance to kind of get as much gaming in. Although that's starting to change a bit. Me and my wife are finding that we're getting a little bit of time in for some interesting little kind of 2-player and smaller, lighter games, in between naps and things like that. So no, that's been okay, and hopefully we'll get back there in the coming months as well.
I was actually going to say I'm very impressed actually that you managed to fit in, because I mean I have two sisters who are like, for the last sort of like 7-8 years have had kids at various stages, and like they keep saying they have no time to do anything. So the fact you've managed to fit some board games in there really shows your commitment to the hobby. So I think a round of applause for that. Creamy Master has just joined, so I just wanted to say hi to Creamy Master as well. Don't forget, if you want to ask Cream a question, like just type it in the chat and we'll get to him later. Have you so obviously you mentioned my place of work during that chat, and Kareem has actually come and visited the cafe that I work at, and that's actually where we first met, which is pretty cool. But has your the number of games you've actually played changed since being sort of like just in 2-player games, or was that kind of your preference anyway? I have a feeling it wasn't. I feel like you were more 3-4 player kind of guy.
Yeah, I mean, it was kind of sort of went through a weird cycle. So when I first got into the hobby, I did have a couple of 4-player, 3-player games, but because it was sort of just mostly me and my wife, did actually invest in quite a lot of 2-player games at the time. So there was a lot of the kind of the Jaipurs and the Lost Cities and things like that. Great 2-player games, because I was mostly playing just with my wife. And then when I started finding out here in London about sort of especially the London on Board gaming community, which is fantastic, and has a load of gaming nights and events and a ton of great people that I've managed to meet through that sort of club. And when I started getting more and more into that, then it made sense to invest more in 3-4 player games, because I could take them to an evening, a gaming evening, and play them with other people. And my wife isn't quite as crazy about board games as I am, for better or for worse. She does enjoy them from time to time, but I think, as most of us with this sort of board gaming sickness are aware, we need to sometimes get our fixes at quite regular frequencies. So having London on Board with, I think, gaming nights pretty much every day of the week almost was a great discovery. So it's sort of shifted, and ironically now, because again it's just sort of me and my wife, because of the lockdown and everything like that, I've kind of shifted back to some 2-player games. So I've been sort of trying to get a few of the more kind of recent 2-player games that have come out, which have been kind of interesting. But it's sort of an interesting kind of wave and back to a 2-player sort of centric world for me.
Has there been any like highlights, any really good games that you've played in the last 3 months?
Yeah, I sort of haven't played that many games, unfortunately, but I played. I had some games come in from like previous pre-orders and Kickstarters and things like that. Stockpile was one that I backed on Kickstarter last year, which I was really looking forward to playing. I mean, my wife played that quite a bit and really enjoyed it. It's I'm sure it's probably a little bit more interesting with 3 or 4 players, because it's like a bidding game, but it actually works pretty well for 2, and it's quite quick and it's quite fun. I also got Aqualin, I think is the name, is a Cosmo 2-player line game. I think it's only been released in Germany at the time being, and it's got these cool little sort of square Bakelite tiles, look a little bit like the Azul tiles. Yeah. And it's a tile laying game, but it's very simple. It's sort of, you're trying to make groups of, there's basically 2 types of tiles, animals or colors, or actually they're all animals, but they're animals and colors, and you can kind of choose whether you're making groups of animals or groups of colors, and you can kind of like move the pieces around the board and try to sort of maximize your points. Pretty easy game, very simple, but really nice tactile Bakelite tiles, really fun. And then more recently, I got the game Anchor, which is kind of spiritually related to Splendor. It's by the same publisher, I believe. And that was really fun, really nice pieces, great sort of small little compact box, so perfect for a minimalist like myself and somebody with limited shelf space. So that was really good. And I've just recently got the Robin of Locksley game as well.
Oh my god, this is new. 'Cause, honestly, all of these games are kind of new to my radar, which is interesting. Stockpile I've heard of before, but I've not really know too much about it. So that's pretty good. Like and based on that, I had like loads of things to ask off of that. By the way, Creamy Master says if your partner is not into board games, you just have to choose the right friends, and I would probably say agree with that. And that's my situation. Like I can play some games with my partner, but for the vast majority of games, I could not play with them. So I have to like play with my friends instead. So I'm really looking forward to the time when we get back to open.
Well, exactly. We can't really meet our friends as easily as we once could. So that's the difference. But yeah, sorry, go ahead. I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, I didn't mean to cut you off as well. I realized I did that as well. Speaking of obviously having limited time and having partner, etc., who's not necessarily as into board games as you, have you kind of delved into the realm of solo games?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I've had quite a few chats with people on Twitter who are really into solo gaming. And I think I always really liked the concept of solo games. There's kind of a romanticism to them. It's sort of this, always had this image of, waking up really early in the morning, putting on, the kettle, making a cup of tea, and just sort of sitting at the kitchen table and,
Yeah, I can see that.
Breaking out like a beautiful little solo game and just kind of sitting there, almost like a meditative kind of state. And I've done it a few times. I do own a few solo games, but the problem I always have is when I sit down to play solo games or consider playing solo games, I tend to be thinking to myself, well, I could just be playing a video game now. So I've got a Switch that I bought a few months back, and it's really great to be able to you got one as well. So fantastic little devices, and you can kind of quite easily play a game by yourself, or with other people, on multiplayer. But it's sort of one of those things where I'm just always like, maybe I'll just play a video game, or even going on to like a board game website, like Board Game Arena or something like that, where you can play with people remotely very easily and get that same kind of, satisfaction. But it's kind of, I wish to aspire to be more of an actual solo board gamer. I have this romanticized vision of myself playing solo games more. So I love the concept, and I more prefer games that are kind of designed to be solo than games where they have solo modes. So I think a lot of those do work quite well, the automas that you've seen in various games and such. But I sort of prefer games that are designed from the ground up as solo games. So yeah,
I mean, we can talk about that for sure. Daryl says that he's fortunate that his wife is his gaming partner, and so she's willing to play anything. So the quarantine hasn't changed their gaming habits, and that's actually I'm quite jealous of that. Like nothing would be better for me. I mean, I'm actually quite fortunate because I'm living with we're two couples living in the same flat, and so the other couple do actually enjoy board games, I think, a bit more than my partner. So I do have options and stuff. But I would like it, because you can't always guarantee on them being available. So it'd be great to have a partner. Speaking of the solo games, that's quite interesting to me, because I have recently gotten into solo games as part of this streaming. In that I've only been playing games that are soloable. And what I was surprised at when I was looking through my collection at the start of this, thinking, I've only probably got like 2 or 3 games that I've got that can be played solo. And actually there's a lot. So I do value your point about preferring games that are designed to be solo, but I actually don't own that many, because the kind of key reason to play board games is the social aspect of it. So I've always bought games with other people in mind, but I have vastly enjoyed the a lot of the games that I have played with just like solo rules, bolted onto a multiplayer game. So actually, like Carcassonne is a great solo puzzle, which is surprising because they released the solo version rules for that recently. And that was really good. Heard about that. Do you have Carcassonne in your collection?
No, Carcassonne is actually one of those kind of classic games that I've never played aside playing the app. I've played the app a few times, but I've never actually played it in person. So it's kind of one of those things where everybody, I think, has got a few classic games that they've never actually played, and that's one of mine that I've never actually gone around to play. Despite it seems like a really cool game to play, and it's a classic for a reason, I think. But no, I've never played it, but it is kind of nice to know that there's a solo version now. I mean, that's really cool.
I mean, like because I think I was one of the first people to actually do a video of it, and it's doing relatively well compared to the other videos on my channel. I think that's because It is good. I'd recommend giving it a look, even just the rules, because it doesn't feel like it'd be as good as it actually is. So I'd really rate that. So I mean, let's get to the sort of crux of your sort of, I guess, Twitter brand. Oh, actually, Steph's just said they only play solo when there is an app for it. So some of the games I actually played have apps developed for it. Great Western Trail, you can play solo using an app, and you don't really have to do much about the game. And that was actually really fun as well.
That's really cool, because I know you're a massive fan of that game.
Yes.
So,
I love it.
Yeah.
And I was actually really surprised to learn about that, because it doesn't seem like a game that has an obvious solo element to it. But it's a fan-created one. It's not even an official one, but it works really well. So yeah, going to the crux of obviously your brand. Sure. It's all about the minimalism. I believe you wrote on Twitter that you have a collection of 30 games. Now, is that still true?
It's sort of up to about 35 now, and that's excluding expansions, but it tends to sort of hover around that sort of 30, 25, 35. It's sort of, I don't think I've gone above 40 at any one time, but I think now, because it's actually harder to get rid of games, or it was a bit harder to get rid of games during the lockdown, because I tend to meet people like in town and just exchange in person, so that's a little bit more difficult. But yeah, it's genuinely generally below that sort of 30 point of games in the collection. Absolutely.
So I mean, what I want to know about this sort of minimalism element to your collection, was that something that was a part of your life? Like, are you a minimalist by nature, and did that sort of like come into your board game collection from the start? Were you immediately thinking, when I get to a certain point, I'm going to have to cut it there afterwards?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. And I don't know if I've ever really spoken about it in any kind of depth. There's no sort of dramatic story about it, really.
The origin story of Kareem.
The origin story, yeah. There's no sort of radioactive spider. But so I guess I've always been interested by the minimalist kind of lifestyle. It's something that's always kind of appealed to me. I've never been somebody who sort of has tons of personal possessions or an extensive wardrobe, or it's just never been my style. And so I don't think I'd ever classify myself as like an extreme minimalist, but certainly minimalist friendly or minimalist sort of tendencies. And I think the thing that, when I first got into the hobby, was I think when you kind of come from the normal world of board gaming, you're used to sort of like, maybe when you were a kid, your family having like Scrabble, Monopoly, Guess Who, or Connect Four, a couple of games, right? Maybe you have 3 or 4 games: chess, dominoes, or checkers, or drafts, as we say in the UK. So maybe 4 or 5 games max. And I think that was kind of my normal perception of a board game collection. I think that was kind of what I perceived as a non-hobbyist, gamer. Like, that's a normal number of games to have, 4 or 5 games, and then when I started watching a lot of the, board gaming videos, I was just like astonished to see these people. Every video was like somebody in front of an absolute wall of games. Every single video, and it's still to this day.
Sort of guilty a little bit of that.
It's fair enough. I don't, I take no, no need to be guilty. It's kind of like a standard thing now, I think, in gaming. And I was just like, wow, these people actually own that many games. And it really sort of stunned me at the beginning. I was like really surprised. Like, could you even pick out these many games, or how did these many games even exist? So
somebody in the chats just said that they're very impressive that you've only got 35, because they can't give away their games and they're up to over 2,000. So, wow. I mean, that's a classic. Someone referred to him as a board game maximalist.
Yeah, well, that sounds like it. Yeah, I mean, I think 2,000 is pretty high from even a lot of the people that I know. I think like 200, 300 is sort of a respectable, collection size from the people that I know, at least. But I think one of the other factors is space. I live in London, very sort of expensive city, small spaces. I have a very small apartment that I live in, and there's just not the space for that kind of quantity of board games. So rewinding back a little bit. So again, I saw these people with all these games, and at the time I was playing with my wife, and we just didn't have the time to learn all these different games and play all these games. So I kind of, when I was thinking about creating, a profile to discuss board games, I was like, well, everybody seems to have all these tons of games in the background. Maybe I'll just flip it on its head and just try to have, this notion of having fewer games. So that was kind of the idea that I had.
Yeah.
I don't know whether it's sort of worked out, in the board gaming space, because I think the tendencies are very strong to always want the new thing and game halls, new releases, and I'm guilty of that, as anybody else. But so that was kind of the origin story, so to speak. And
That's great.
yeah, no.
So kind of following on from that, I mean, it's kind of an obvious question, but like what's the rules? Like and Kareem Masters asked the same thing. Like what criteria, will allow a game to enter the collection, and similarly, what will make a game leave your collection?
No, that's a very good question. So I think really I start off with trying to do a very, very comprehensive vetting of games before I think about buying them. So I read the reviews, I check out the BGG ratings, I watch the playthroughs, I watch the other video reviews, and I just try to look at it from a few different angles. And then I try to particularly look at a couple of other criteria, like how well does it play at different player counts? So even if I may be looking to get 3 or 4 player games, it's always a bonus if I know that it's going to play well at 2, because I can play, with my wife if it's a game I really enjoy. I'll also look at the complexity. Does that mean that I can double this game up for, family or non-gamer friends? What's the kind of flexibility of the game around that sort of area of complexity and weight, as one would say. So I kind of try to look at these different pieces. I look at the theme, look at the, is it a game that like I already have a lot of different games that are similar to that? So, I've got a few tile laying games, and then you see there's all these other cool tile laying games and polyomino games coming out. Like, I might want to play them, but then I'm like, okay, I've already got quite a few games in this category. I can't really afford to add more games in that space.
So then in that, is your mind then thinking, well, can I replace one of them?
Well, that usually kind of leads to the replacement factor. So it's like, okay, I've played this game, I've enjoyed it, but there's another X style of game that I'd rather be playing instead. Maybe I've played it at a gaming group and I've really enjoyed it. And then that will be sort of a question or criteria for replacing a game potentially. So I think it's a combination of really close vetting initially to make sure the game is really good. I think a lot of people are a little bit more flexible than I am with buying games. They'll kind of see a few games that look interesting, and then there's always the fallback where you can say, okay, well, if I don't enjoy it, I'll just sell it, right? And people clearing out their games is quite a big thing, right? We see that a lot online, and people just doing massive sort of culls of games, which is fair enough. But I try to just be a little bit more selective when I'm bringing games into the collection to start with. So that's kind of the bringing into the collection side of things. In terms of getting rid of games, I think it's a few things. Like, have I really enjoyed this game after playing it? So it's kind of just like my own sense of have I really enjoyed this game or not. Sometimes it's games where I've played it so much that I've kind of burnt it out. There's some games that I played too many times and I was just like, all right, I'm kind of done with it now. And one example of this is actually viticulture.
Oh, okay.
So this is a game that I bought, and beautiful artwork. Really quite simple game, but quite satisfying. And I do think till this day one of the best and most elegant worker placement games that I've ever played, at least.
It's all about that grand worker, isn't it?
Yeah, El Grande. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And my wife really enjoyed it as well. We actually played it, I think, 10 times over the first weekend that we got it.
Wow.
So we really loved it. This was pre-baby, so we had a bit more time on our hands. But
yeah, I wouldn't have thought otherwise.
No. But really enjoyed it, really played it. And, I think over the next couple of weekends, we played it again at that level, like, 5 or 6 times just every weekend, over and over and over again. And like, that was significantly more times than I would have played any game. And it kind of just got to a point where we sort of, stopped playing it gradually, and sort of I think we kind of had enough and wanted to play some other games. And then we came back to it a few months later, and it just didn't have the same spark anymore. It was just kind of like, felt very much like been there, done that. And I decided, well, if we're not going to play and not going to enjoy it, then it's got to go. And that's a game that a lot of people rightfully rate as a really excellent game. I totally don't disagree with that. Have full respect for the game. It's a great game. I'd really recommend it to almost anybody. And but it was just one of those cases where we played it so many times that it was time for it to move on. So that's kind of an example. But more typically, it's a game that just doesn't gel, just doesn't work out, and it's a much more easy decision to just let it go.
Do you? And just a quick thing on sort of on the top of that, you mentioned earlier on about like having Kickstarters arriving and stuff.
Yeah.
Do you already consider the game a part of your collection from the moment you back it, or do you kind of back it, go, I'll deal with whether it fits in my collection sort of later on?
Yeah, I kind of tend to do the other. So I have on my Board Game Geek profile, I have the pre-ordered games. So I put anything that's a Kickstarter or something I pre-ordered into that list, just so I kind of know like that's the holding area, what's going to be coming into the collection, So I maybe it's a bit of a cheat that I don't actually put it right into my collection straight away. I've done it on a few occasions, I think, but when I got to a point where I had quite a few games that were pre-ordered and coming in, I just said, okay, let's just put these in their own section, and then I can kind of keep a better eye on them. So, but then there is that kind of sort of shuffle, like when they come in, like, okay, what's going to happen? I mean, there is a very practical consideration to my minimalism as well, is that basically I have allocated very limited shelf space that I'm allowed to have my games in.
Yeah.
So I do tend to sort of secret them around the house and other places, sometimes under the bed, under the couch, under the sofa, when a few come in. But I essentially have one shelf that my wife kind of made me promise that I would not exceed. Overspill. And that's kind of something that always sort of makes me sort of keep a closer eye on the number of games I have. So that's another very practical reason to the minimalism.
And on that basis, have you ever thought, well, actually, you know what, I could get that one big game, but I could also probably get like 7 small games?
Yeah, I had this thinking, a couple of months back, or maybe last year, when there was this Snowdonia Deluxe edition that was released. And Snowdonia was this game that I played for the first time last year, and I just thought it was fantastic.
It's really good. It's a really good game.
Great game. Yeah, great game. And it was one of those games where, it just hit the sweet spot. It was, simple enough, but, satisfying. And just, I really enjoyed the whole sort. I enjoyed the theme as well. Snowdonia, fantastic train theme, really sort of whimsical and beautiful. And then I really wanted to get a copy of the game, but very hard to get. Sort of as I'm sure you're aware. And then there was this deluxe edition, but I was like, wow, that thing is huge. The box is like massive.
Yeah,
and
I've seen it. It's literally like bigger than Gloomhaven almost.
Okay, wow, yeah. So I was just like, there's no way that I can justify getting that.
Yeah.
And also, I think there's all those different expansions in there that I would probably never play, just because I would never have time to get to all of them and include them, as amazing value as that is. So I just, that was one that was really kind of heartbreaking, but I did end up getting Alubari instead, which was kind of, my sort of spiritual kind of successor to that game.
So just as a kind of anecdote on the side, this is a game I feel really bad about because Kareem kindly knew I was going to Essen last year, and he asked, look, if you've got time, can you pick me up a copy of Alubari, whatever. I said, yeah, absolutely, like there's no reason not to, like I'll have plenty of space, etc. And then it came down to the actual convention and I just like completely forgot, and actually by the time I remembered, it was sold out. So sadly and frustratingly, I had to go back to Kareem and say, look, I'm really sorry, but I didn't get the game. Like, I feel so awful. But you did get your hands on it eventually, right? Like
I did, and okay. And just to clarify, Russ, it was you who very kindly agreed to do me that very kind favor, and honestly, water under the bridge, no big deal.
No, I think I'm at the point now where I'm like, okay, he is okay with the fact that it didn't happen. So I feel better, but yeah. That was just a funny little anecdote on the side.
I don't wake up in the middle of the night, anymore.
Ruining my name.
Exactly. Yeah.
So we've only got actually time for like a few more questions before I actually, challenge you to the game that I've come up with. So I'm just trying to sort of pick the most interesting questions for you. Let's just talk about briefly, because obviously a lot of, you're on Twitter. You're quite active on Twitter. At least you were a lot, and then obviously you had the kid, and then now I see you're back active on Twitter again a lot.
Yeah.
Do you?
Bit,
who's like who's like board game media do you consume? Which board game media do you consume the most? And that's content creators as well as like websites, etc.
Sure. I mean, I think, obviously Board Game Geek is the kind of North Star that everybody directs to. And I think that doesn't really bear mentioning. But, I'm a bit, sort of conventional in this approach. I kind of stick with, the Dice Tower, the Rahdos, Actual Lull, is another sort of favorite. There's a few other, smaller content creators that I watch, from time to time. Russ, your channel is one that I've dipped in and out of quite a few times as well.
But thank you very much.
But I think some of it also depends on the game.
Yeah.
Right? Like if you're interested in a particular game, maybe only certain people have covered it. So, John Gets Games is one I'm really starting to enjoy more recently, actually. But I guess pretty conventional. And there was a time where I had more time to consume more board game content, so maybe I sort of stretched my wings a bit further then. But now it's kind of like, okay, let me come back to the classics. There's certainly a few more out there, but I'd say kind of those core, more classical, conventional channels are the ones that I tend to look at. But there always seems to be more new ones, and I'm always impressed by the kind of new channels that come up. And I always think that this market has hit full saturation at this point.
Yeah,
but there's always more people coming in, and they seem to generate an audience and do some really great work as well.
Yeah, I mean, I've been doing this for a few years now, and obviously I'm still not like anywhere close to being like big time, not even medium time. But I'm enjoying what I'm doing. By the way, that's not to negate any of the like success that I've had so far. But I do often find it surprising because obviously even when I started it, I always felt there was quite a lot of content out there, and I was surprised that and yet still new people are coming up and doing really well and surpassing the big names, and that's always nice to see because I think if you have a good voice, you have interesting things to say, and often with like some sort of like niche, some like focus on a specific thing, I think there is still an opportunity to do really well. And I don't want to sort of delve into it because it's it's quite a depressing topic, but quite a lot of recent situations have kind of unveiled a lot of unpleasantness in the industry, and so even sort of successful bigger kind of names are finding themselves kind of falling foul of things which like having certain views which aren't sort of in the keeping of the board game community, and I totally understand that. So there's always room for somebody new. So if you are considering doing it, if anyone is watching this and thinking like I can't get into it, I would say do it because you might not hit the big time, but you can have a good time doing it anyway.
No, I think that's a really good point, actually. Yeah, absolutely.
Daryl said that he agrees. I said the Snowdonia Deluxe Master Set is amazing with a lot of content, and the box is enormous. Yes, it really is. So another question I want to ask you is, and this is more about your sort of Twitter personality, because this is something I have to say, and like this is quite, I wouldn't say it's like too personal, but I'd say it's quite a personal question. So feel free to say, I don't really feel comfortable answering that. But I know that on Twitter you have, I would say you're one of the few people I would say is like quite honest and open with their feelings of like and dislike about certain games. So I would say the term I would use with you personally is you're quite a brutally honest person. Okay. Have you been told that before? Like, have you?
I don't know, actually. No, I don't think I've ever been specifically told it before.
It's a good thing, by the way. Like And I
guess it is what it is, right? I mean, it's sort of
like because I'll say this is like an anecdote, especially in the playtesting community. It's actually such a valuable attribute to have, is to be honest with people, especially people whereas when I'm doing reviews, because I've done reviews, in fact I put up a review today where I had some criticisms with the game itself, but I was almost like I felt a bit bad about bringing these up, but there's been some very good movement lately in terms of why critique and being critical of games is actually something you do only if you really love the hobby. And I'd say that's something that you should treasure. The fact that I often feel like when I'm reading your words on Twitter, I'm like getting the real you. I'm like, he's not mincing his words. He's not trying to just say like a game is good. I've always felt that's quite a good attribute to have. And I wondered if you'd ever been sort of like told that, because I think it's really good.
No, look, I really appreciate it. It's very kind of you to say. And, I think there's sort of two levels to it, right? I think on one level, and I think I tweeted this sometime last year, I can't remember, but I was kind of like, sometimes I take a step back and I just think like, who am I or who is anybody to kind of be criticizing people who have put forward a creative work and, they've actually had the success of making that into a physical product that people are actually playing and interacting with. And that's an amazing achievement in and of itself, whatever the game is, whatever that looks like. And I think like, on one level, full respect to all those people, and there's nothing you can criticize about that activity, I think, or that sort of creativity. But then on the other side, there is just a kind of a view of a game, and it's not a tribute to the person who's created it or whatever. It's just a view and a perception, and I think it's just trying to keep those two separate. That, as you said, you can critique something and express an opinion, and also just be mindful that like, there's a lot of variance in gaming tastes, right? There's some games that I might love that you might hate, or vice versa. For example, you're probably a lot more crazy about Great Western Trails than I am. But there are a lot of these diverse views, and I think that's great. And I think as long as you can just respect that and not take it personally or make it personal, then why not? Oh yeah, speak truth, right?
Yeah, and I would say like you are like the sort of epitome of someone who is honest, but you're not mean and you're not like personal against something. I often feel like when I read something you've written, it's like it's got merit behind it. I think that even like the recent thing you mentioned about having like a real issue with the fact that we continually use colonial city building themes is a problem, and I do agree with that. I think that is something like, why are we still kind of so obsessed with that? I think I know why, but I've never actually broached that topic before, and that's something that's good. Like, we need to be talking about these things. So I genuinely sincerely think that it's a good thing, and nothing of a slight against you. Just want to clarify that.
No, absolutely not. No, look, I really appreciate that. And I think obviously politics and those kind of issues are a big topic, and you could probably talk about that for an entire 24-hour period. So I probably no time to get too deep into those kind of issues. But I think for the most part, I like to focus on the games. I like to I think what was really always nice for me is that I have a certain background, I have a certain perspective on life and different things. And what was always really nice to me is that with board gaming, you could find common ground with a lot of different people who have different backgrounds, different lives, different perspectives to you. And I always think that's a great thing about board games. And at the same time, since we're here talking about games, why not talk about some of the ways they make us feel, whether that's good or bad, or maybe they elicit political or other kind of sentiments. And I think that's absolutely fine for people to express, and we should be open to talk about that.
You could almost say you're like pioneer in that regard, because you were kind of criticizing themes and like some of the political elements of board game in general before obviously this whole recent Black Lives Matter movement happened. And I think I think that's a good thing. Like, we should be talking about it, and you were kind of there earlier on. So,
yeah, I mean, I think I was, but I think there were certainly some other people who were there and are there in a much more consistent basis than I. My views are sometimes, can cut both ways. Sometimes I don't think a game is specifically controversial, but other people might. And I think I've had a lot of this discussion over Twitter about, where is the line? Because some people don't want to play games about resource extraction, right? Because it's offensive to them. They are very conscious about the environment, all these kind of things. I respect that. It's not a line that bothers me too much in the abstracted form of a game, but I can kind of understand why somebody might not want to play that, or maybe some people might not want to play games about certain activities or themes or whatever. And so it's a complex issue, right? It's there's a lot going on there. But I think the other side of it is attitudes towards players and people who are playing games and participating in games, and that's a really big topic, as well. So, and I think it's a lot less, it's a lot more black and white there, in the sense that, we should all respect people who are playing games. It's a commercial product. You can buy a game, you play it, enjoy it. Yeah. You playing a game doesn't impact my enjoyment of a game, or vice versa. So I always wonder why people get kind of annoyed by other people playing games and stuff like that. It's very strange, but I mean that's again, that's like one of those kind of
like edge topics that we could sort of like have a whole hour-long chat about itself.
Absolutely,
but obviously we are unfortunately limited to time here. And actually, speaking of which, I want to kind of get onto the game because we have actually a few audience questions that I'd like to get to. So let's get to the game now. So, by the way, Daryl said, to be fair, if you want to keep a collection down to 30 games, then you have to be super critical. So, yeah, that works in your favor, really. So,
it's true.
So the game that I've created, you might not be surprised, is all about the minimalism. So I've called it Board Game Minimalist. Okay, this is very simple. And the game works like this. There's 5 questions. The answer to each of these questions is a game name. Okay. In order to work out the game, you get to ask 4 things about the game, okay? And I'm going to be as minimalist as I can with what information I give you about this game.
Sure.
And you're going to use all of those answers to try and work out the game itself, okay? So the 4 things you can ask about the game, and I've got a cool little thing here. Now, you probably can't see it on the Skype. You definitely can't see it on the Skype, but I've come up with a little hangman thing. So the first, technically there's 5 things about the game. The one of them is the number of letters and words in the game. So I've just put one up on the screen. I'm just going to give you an example before we actually get into the proper game. So let's say the game was Catan. All right, you're allowed to ask what one letter of the word is. Okay, you're allowed to ask the theme, or at least one of, or the main theme about the game, which I will just give you. You're allowed to know one of the mechanics about the game. Again, it'll just be one that I feel is like most apt to the game itself. And then you're allowed to ask one yes or no question about the game. And using all of that, you're going to then try and guess what the game is. Okay. So if it was Catan, for example, you'd ask me, you'd say, what's the theme? And I would say, well, this is going to be tricky, but I might say settlement. I might say civilization building, or I might say resource collection. Okay, that's a mechanic. Sorry. But yeah, do you see what I'm going? And if you would say I'll ask for the 3rd letter, and I would say T. Okay, and then you now know the game is a 5-letter word with T in the middle. You might go, well, that's kind of obvious. It's Catan. Okay, so that's generally how the game works. All right. Okay. So I've got the first word is a game of 8 letters. Okay. So what would you like to know? Would you like to ask a yes or no question? Would you like to know theme, a mechanic, or one of the letters in the game?
Well, let's start with theme first. I think is useful.
Theme. Okay. Well, I'm going by category. All right. So I'm going to say one of the category in this is one of the categories in this, according to Board Game Geek, by the way, is animals. Okay. Okay. So.
Animals, okay. And what's the main mechanism then?
So mechanism, I'm going to give you a fair one. I don't want to,
there's probably
there's some that don't make as much sense as others. I would say it's worker placement.
Okay, interesting.
Okay.
So
worker placement game, animal theme, with 8 letters in it.
Okay. And what's the question about the letters?
So you can ask one of the letters. You can ask for the first one, the last one, or the second, third, whatever you want.
Okay. What's the first letter?
The first letter is A.
Okay.
I'm going to... Oh, you ready? You can ask a yes or no question, but you can just take a guess if you want.
Is it Agricola?
It is Agricola, yes. I was just doing a fancy thing on the thing. Yes, Creamy Master got it as well. I think Creamy Master got in there just before you did, but the delay. So yes, it was Agricola. So yeah, there we go. Well done. So that's 1 point.
Okay, cool.
So let's go on to the second one. So the second one is a game of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 11 letters, I think. Is that right? Yeah, 11 letters. So it's an 11-letter word, single word.
Okay, single word, 11 letters. All right. So I guess let's do the old theme again. That's kind of a useful heuristic.
So this is a farming game.
Okay.
And you know it's not Agricola.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. Farming. Is it a worker placement game?
So you could ask for a mechanism, or like the mechanism, or you can ask that as your yes or no question.
Okay, I'll ask that as my yes or no question. First, is it a worker placement game?
Yes.
Okay. Is it viticulture?
Yes, and that was just so funny that you said that, because I personally wouldn't have got it from saying farming, but it was funny that you talked about it in the thing earlier on.
Yes, yeah.
That's really impressive, though. Fair play. Like, yeah.
Okay.
Viticulture is it. So you're on 2 out of 5 so far.
It's just the name is quite long as well, right? So I was thinking, like, what game has a name that long as well?
11 letters. That's madness. Well done, though. Fair play. You're obviously it's obviously doing well. So let's go on to the third one. This is a 2-word game. So the first word is 6 letters and the second word is 4 letters.
Okay.
Right. What would you like to know?
First letter.
The first letter is P.
P.
I'm going to update it for the people watching at home. I've got a nice little system that lets me do that. So
okay, interesting.
At least
okay. And then let's go on to the theme next. What's the theme?
Okay, so this is a game I haven't played, so I'm just going to do this. This is apparently a city building game.
City building game. Starting with a P.
Somebody had a guess on the stream, but they were not correct. The second word has too many letters in it. It's only 4 in the second word.
And the first is 6, right?
That's right. So it's a P, word beginning with P, 6 letters.
Yeah.
And then the second word's got 4 letters. So you still have a yes or no question, and you can ask about one of the mechanics.
All right, let's try one of the mechanics. It's not ringing any bells right now, but let's try one of the mechanics.
Okay. So I feel like I'm going to give you the most useful one in this one, which is a action drafting game.
Action drafting.
I hope you've played this, otherwise it's going to be very difficult.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Maybe Pulsar comes to mind, but it's the wrong kind of theme, I think. But yeah, I don't know. I think I may have to take a pass on this one.
You have still got a yes or no question.
Is the first word planet?
No.
Okay. Yeah, I don't. This is proving tougher for me.
Okay.
Unfortunately.
So it's basically that's very interesting. You said Pulsar was it 2048, right? So that would fit, but unfortunately it isn't correct. This one was actually Puerto Rico.
Ah, of course.
Have you played that?
I've only actually played it online on Board Game Arena.
Ah, okay. But, so I don't feel too bad because you have technically played it. But yeah, unfortunately, Puerto Rico. But that's still fine. You're still doing well.
Well, that should have been an easy one, but for some reason it just didn't register.
It's the nature of the game, unfortunately. I'm not like an expert game creator, so unfortunately these games aren't always, flawless or perfect. But, I give them a go. So
no, it's good. It's good.
So the fourth game is another 8-letter one. Another 8-letter word, single word game. And so, what would you like to know? We've got mechanism, category, 1 yes or no question or letter.
Okay. Theme?
So, this theme / category of this game is, I'm pretty sure I know it, but I'm just again making sure that I get it right. It's a word game.
Okay. Word game. Okay. And let's go for the first letter again. That's
the first letter of this game is a D.
Word game. The first letter is a D.
Nothing's immediately jumping out. I'm sensing.
No.
You still have options.
Okay. So what else can I ask? The mechanism.
So you've done the mechanism. You've done the. You haven't asked about the mechanism.
Theme.
So mechanism and a yes or no question.
Yeah. So let's go for the mechanism. Let's see what we got.
Okay. So one of the mechanics in this game is communication limits.
Oh, okay. I think I know it.
Yeah.
Is it Decrypto?
It is Decrypto. Yes. Congratulations. Somebody guessed codenames, and that was my trap that I set. Because it was an 8-letter word game, which people would have. Well, no, that's not technically right, is it? Because it was 9 letters. Damn it. Okay, well, someone still guessed it. So you fell into my trap, unfortunately, Kareem Master. But yes, Decrypto. So that's to go. Another point. So you're on 3 now, with one more left. So let's get that up and get that out of the way. So we've got the final one is a 10-letter game. One word.
10-letter game, one word. Wow. Okay. Let's go for first letter again. This seems to be working for me.
First letter is it? Yep. So the first letter of the final answer is a G.
G. Okay. It could be quite a few. But let's try this. Is it Ginkgopolis?
No.
Okay.
I'm going to use that up as your yes or no question, so you can still get it.
I was getting a bit cocky there, getting a bit trying to be a bit too much of a hot shot there. But okay.
I applaud that.
So we
Renegade.
First letter, yes or no. So let's go for mechanism.
Mechanism. All right. Mechanism in this is, I feel like,
deck building.
I'm just going to pick the right one.
Yeah.
I'm going to say it's a... Okay, I'm going to do this. It's a cooperative game.
Okay. And the title is one word.
That's right, yeah.
Okay. Cooperative game.
I'm guessing you'll want the extra information about which category it is, right?
Why not?
Yeah. So it's a fantasy game.
Okay. So I guess it would have to be one of those games that is perhaps one of the most popular and highly rated games of BGG. Perhaps BGG rank number 1? Gloomhaven?
Well, wouldn't you know, it is indeed Gloomhaven. Well done.
Okay.
Gloomhaven.
So that's another game I've never played, actually. Gloomhaven.
Oh, but you knew it. And look, Kareem Master was right there behind you as well, and managed to get it. I think it was the fantasy thing, maybe, or even the cooperative thing that got it for the end.
You know, I was thinking about ghost stories, but I was like, wait a second, that's 2 words. So, that's...
I'm just checking if... OOMH. No, I was right. Okay. Phew. Yeah, I was just... Kareem Master was like making me question my...
it is
correctness. All right, so actually, let's get to the audience questions. We've got 5 minutes left, so without further ado, let's get to the questions. Kareem Master asked earlier on, I think... well, actually, technically, Kareem Master asked that earlier on, but I think... I guess there's... Oh, yes. Well, it asked about when you decide to keep one criteria for that, which you kind of already touched on. But actually, if you have another question, what I'll do is I'll go to one of the questions we got on Twitter, because there's some good ones on here. One of the questions we had on Twitter, bear with me, I'm just scrolling back through my thing. Was there a time or a moment of inspiration that started you down the road of game minimalism, which I know you kind of briefly talked about earlier on, but that was from Carl at N20 Games.
Yeah, I think it's kind of what I touched on a little bit earlier about sort of just seeing all these collections that people had that were massive and just trying to think about what would be the opposite direction. You know, what would it be like to just have a very well curated, set of games that I think for me, the ultimate point I'd like to get to is like maybe 10 games that are like the best games the games that I'd actually love the most. And that would just be my collection that I would have. And there'd be games that I could kind of play quite frequently over and over and, reduce the churn. Because one of the problems is I've gotten criticism in the past for saying, well, you're not really a minimalist because you still buy a lot of games and then get rid of them, which I accept in a way. I think that's a fair comment because I do buy a lot of games and I've had quite a few games churn through my collection.
I guess it's all about the reasons why you're a minimalist. Are you a minimalist because you want to reduce your sort of consumption of things? But then even still, you could argue you still are doing that by giving the games away to other players. Like there's no extra games being created as a result.
That's true. I think that's fair. But I guess like in an ultimate level, let's say the ultimate black belt level of minimalism, I'd like to get down to like 10 games that are just like, these are the cream of the crop for me. And maybe, those change every now and again, but like really they just sort of stay a little bit more kind of rock solid, and that would be my ultimate goal.
And just a quick answer if you can with regards, have you got any games in mind that would be part of that top 10 right now?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the games that I could never really get rid of is probably Lost Cities. It was one of the first games I got, and it's a really simple kind of basic game that I would want to hang on to. And I think a game like Flamme Rouge as well is one of those games that's just so fun and flexible, and you can play with so many people. So those are two that come to mind. There's probably a few other ones, but those are the ones that come to mind immediately.
Cool. All right. Who What Why asks, has any game you culled become one you've regretted culling? Which one and why? If the answer is why.
Yeah. I did a video last year about the 10 or 7 best games that I lost from my collection. There were some real great games in there, and probably one that viticulture is one that I do regret getting rid of in a sense, but perhaps Concordia was one of the ones that I really regret getting rid of quite a bit. I got rid of it because basically my wife just beat me at it all the time mercilessly, and I just got sick of losing. So that was my very valiant reason for getting rid of it.
It's almost like a very spiteful reason to get rid of a game.
It is very spiteful. You know what? Very
it's your reason, and that's all that matters.
Yeah.
So, another question, quite an interesting question. I don't know if you have an answer to this, but what do some games get wrong? Because obviously, you've been open about your sort of religious sort of background, but what do some games get wrong about the depiction of Muslims in their games? I mean, that might be quite a loaded answer, so feel free to...
It's quite a long question, I think, to answer adequately. And I would just say, I think in general, we've seen this with a lot of different topics, a lot of different themes, is that you do need to sometimes, I think, do a little bit more research, get other perspectives when you're doing themes about any different kind of culture that's not your own. It just seems to me like good, sensible, common sense that if you're doing a piece of work around a topic which you don't know that much about, it might behoove you to research that and understand it better. So I think that would be my general principle around that approach.
Well, I have just a quite relevant point, because I just put out a review of the game Adventure Mart, and I noticed they'd hired a sensitivity consultant as part of their game creation process, and I thought that was actually really wise. I mentioned in the review that I think it's actually something I'm proud of, that the industry is moving towards hiring these people, and I think that's a really good sort of solution to these situations. Like, hire the right people who are able to sort of give you that sort of feedback, and then be willing to kind of scrap a theme if it doesn't work and isn't being sensitive to the audience that are there to play it.
No, absolutely. And I think there was the big issue with the game Rising Sun, where they had the made up mythical Japanese gods. Somebody had made up some names and they used them in the game, and it's just even if you don't go as far as hiring a sensitivity trainer expert necessarily, you could maybe just take a little bit more time, do some research, elicit some views online. There's plenty of people out there who are able to chat and look at stuff. I've actually looked at a few game designs that maybe were Middle Eastern or Arabian themed to provide some very quick feedback, which is easy enough to do.
I think we'll just leave it there, because we've just run over time, and I know you are a busy family man now, so I don't want to take up too much of your time. But I wanted to obviously give you a chance to sort of plug, in case anybody really enjoyed the chat and isn't already following you on Twitter. How would they be able to sort of follow your kind of musings?
Sure, absolutely. Just I'm at Game Minimalist, one word, on Twitter. So by all means, love to catch up with anybody online. Hit me up, and look forward to continuing the conversation there.
Wonderful. So I'm just going to do a quick plug. I thank you for watching, by the way. As you know, we do these sort of Tina chit chats every Tuesday and Friday. I think the next one I've got coming up may well be with Efka and Elaine from No Pun Included, which I didn't go through before, so hopefully this will happen this time, and then obviously doing some extra board game streams on sort of Wednesday and occasionally the weekend as well. So listen, thank you so much for your time today, Kareem. It was really good chat. One thing I didn't mention, which I was going to, was how awesome your voice is. You have a very soothing voice. I noticed that first when I was watching your YouTube videos. So it's been quite soothing to listen to you, even though we touched on some interesting topics in there as well.
I really appreciate that, and thank you so much for inviting me as well. I really appreciate the opportunity. So
my absolute pleasure. My absolute pleasure to have you on the show. So yeah, that's it for today. If you've enjoyed, obviously, please consider following me, Twitter and Instagram. I also have a Patreon as well. Would allow me to keep doing things like this. Fathoms just said hello just at the end of the stream, and I will be uploading this to YouTube, which is how you'll probably be watching this right now if you're watching it after the show. So yeah, thank you so much for your time again. Please tune into the next one, and also remember to follow, if you aren't already following me on Twitch, please do, because that's how you get notified of any future sort of streams I do. But yeah, that's it for today. Take care, and we will see you next time. Bye.
Take care.